Good morning and welcome to another edition of Market Outsiders. It's Tuesday, June 24th. We're a few minutes before market open today. My name is Namaan. I'm joined by my co-host and colleague, Jenny Rae. Jenny Rae, how are things for you on this Tuesday morning?
Hey, Naman, it's a good Tuesday as far as I'm concerned. I don't know about you, but June always feels like that month where everybody kind of holds their breath. It's not spring, it's not end of school, it's not fully summer yet, but I feel like we kind of just hit summer stride. So summer stride is true in our family. We had a beach day yesterday, a meltdown at a mall. I mean, everything is just, all part and parcel for exactly what you would expect at this time of the summer. So it was great. And I'm looking forward to our convo today.
But
What do you want to
that's the
kick off
full,
with? Anything in particular?
well, I was just going to say that's the full spectrum of summer in one day right there.
It is like that, like when you've hit it. You know when it's not there, but you also know the moment that it is.
Well, you and I have been talking offline around some of the challenges that Delaware is facing to keeping its incorporation business. So I know you had an interesting conversation about this yesterday with someone who's not me, but do you want to just first tee up for us what we're talking about when we talk about Delaware and incorporation before we dive into the news?
Iman, I still want to let you know that my most fun conversations happen on this pod with you about business. So I did really have an interesting convo the last night, and I was never going to talk about it based on just the conversation. But this morning when I woke up and I was looking at the business news, this was in there, and I thought, based on the fact that you are in Texas, and we were having a conversation actually last night about Ohio. I thought that this would be a pretty interesting chat to have today because a lot of people are, if you're operating businesses, you're not looking at the markets. I just want to really emphasize this. You're looking at shapers of the economy and of your economic future as a business operator. And I have never, we're coming up on the 4th of July soon. I've never been more pro-American than I am right now, but also really specifically, I think in the past 3 to 4 years, I've understood the power of federalism in a different way. And the idea that states compete with one another is kind of, to me, the unsung hero in American excellence that a lot of people don't talk about, right? We don't just have a national system. And I spent time in South Africa. I married a South African. I've spent a lot of time in England. Like there are not other places that have that sense of internal betterment and internal competition like the US. So I brought this to the pod today because I thought it might be really interesting to have this conversation. See if we can get out of these pop-ups. So this was the title: Texas, Oklahoma, and Nevada make changes to lure business amid Delaware's Dexit concern. So I live in a state that has Calexit, I think is what they call it, right? Which is just the worst term. We have to come up with a better word for it. But we have fleeing businesses from California. And so I've also been aware of this when you think about competing for human capital, competing for the flow of investor dollars. And let me just give a quick backstory on this, and then I want your context on Texas, and then we should dive into the article. But last night I was in a conversation at a dinner with somebody who is running for office in Ohio and somebody who is putting a business interest of theirs in Ohio. They're expanding into Ohio. And so we had a lot of chats about the future of Ohio, and honestly, like people were mildly interested. What was really the most engaging topic was a question that I asked at dinner, which was why did you, and the business is Anduril, which is a defense contractor using AI. It has historically been drones. They're expanding into a 6 million square foot facility to make AI fighter jets. And so I said, why not California, which is where they currently are? And they literally just said California was never on the table. Like it was, we didn't even look in California. It is they said last year it was possible that they were going to outlaw the very business that we do. Like it is the most anti-business state in the US. Like we couldn't even consider building a future there. So we had to go somewhere else. Now, amongst the places that we chose, and they kind of listed off a number of reasons why Ohio made sense. And it was a little bit of energy, but the number one issue was speed to get things done. I thought that was really, really fascinating when you're talking about building a 6 million square foot operating plant. Then I asked another question. I said, where's plant number three? Right? Is it in, I kind of assumed Texas would be in play. They said it's in Ohio. Like the one that wins our business first gets all of our business. And so it started me thinking about some of these conversations about what states need to do to make themselves more business friendly, and specifically what they are doing to compete over these businesses and why some are winning. And I thought it was fascinating that Ohio happened to win this particular contract. So anyhow, I know you're in Texas. I know that you had a perspective about Texas in particular, but I just wanted to provide that early context because it got me thinking about this. And then when I woke up to this, I thought, okay, we've got to dive into it today.
I love it. So, can I provide a little bit more context before we dive in?
Yeah, you
So,
bet.
when you look at a lot of large companies in the U.S. and you kind of dig into the paperwork, you'll find that they're incorporated in Delaware. And they maybe have little or no operations in Delaware. They certainly aren't headquartered in Delaware, but they have chosen Delaware as their state of incorporation. Now, why is that? I think there's really two reasons why they've done that. Number one, there's a very attractive corporate franchise tax rate in Delaware compared to other states. So you're talking about the competitive nature of the states. Like Delaware figured out, okay, we're small. How do we start to punch above our weight? Well, we need to attract business here. And one of the levers we can pull to attract business here is, a low corporate franchise tax rate. De Tocqueville back in the 1800s called states the laboratories of democracy. So if you want to go read Democracy in America, it was written in like 1830. I'm sure there's like an abridged and updated version. It's fantastic. And he talked about, right, how, the US was working out its kind of system of governance in the states. And I think the same is true for business today. Like we are like the innovation is happening at the state level, and this competition is what makes it so. And so Delaware generates over a third of its state tax receipts from this corporate franchise tax. Like over a third of its revenue every year is generated from these businesses being incorporated there. So it's like a huge deal to Delaware if companies are thinking about going and incorporating somewhere else. And so I think Delaware's been this like preferred state of incorporation for so long, and I think other states are finally starting to catch on. Like, wait, why couldn't we do something similar? And so you're starting to see this move now towards not just more attractive tax rates, but also a chancery court system. So Delaware has a very built out chancery court system, which really arbitrates kind of disputes between kind of companies and shareholders, companies and other companies. And so one of the things that you're starting to see is states just aren't adjusting tax rates, but they're starting to build the infrastructure out that would enable the governance that's required for companies to actually be incorporated there at scale. And so that's in a nutshell kind of why this matters to Delaware and what we're talking about. And so, Jenny Rae, I think what you're going to talk about now is kind of what some of the changes are that Texas, Oklahoma, and Nevada are making to start to lure some of these companies away from Delaware.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that we see from California is that there's almost this pathway for businesses to move to Texas. But what I thought was interesting is that this incorporation issue has largely been separated from where your physical operations are.
Hmm.
Now, in California, what's really fascinating is if you have a headquarters in California, you can't do that. So a lot of businesses have not just moved operations, which they've had in different states for many different business reasons, but they've actually moved headquarters out of California recently. And so there are kind of separate effects, right? Which ones you're operating in may be one decision, which are actually, honestly, Naman, the majority of the economic gain comes from those operations. That's where the
100%.
the physical infrastructure is operating. That's where the people are employed. That's where the taxes are coming from, right? There are pieces of the economic equation that absolutely are tied to the operation. So I think that's still first factor number one. But a lot of these changes are actually coming on pressure from businesses that are already operating in these places, Texas, Oklahoma, and Nevada, and they are looking for this competitive nature. So this was just it, right? Lawmakers in Texas, Oklahoma, and Nevada have recently approved changes aimed at helping their states dip into the lucrative side of corporate litigation. And I was like, okay, here we go, right? that Delaware, with a specialized court and business-friendly laws, has dominated as the world's incorporation capital. And again, coming from California, everybody knows the last thing that you want to do as a business is go to war in California because you're already on uneven legal footing. So business-friendly legal footing, you want to go to war in places where you have a more likely chance to win. So, concerned that these changes may lure corporations away from Delaware, right? These corporate franchise taxes are very substantial. They have responded with their own changes. So, one of the things that I thought was interesting is that Texas actually specifically opened a business court last
Hmm.
year. And the legislation that was focused on that diminished shareholder powers. Again, like California is a very litigious state. If you're a shareholder, you could hang up to the company's expense as a single shareholder issues inside the operations of a business almost indefinitely. So Texas isn't saying that they are giving businesses a free pass. They're just saying that the focus of this business court is to expedite, for example, hearings and reduce individual shareholder power so that it makes sure that there's a balance of what kind of litigious activity would happen and what would happen in the operations of the business. And This interesting kind of other piece of it, right? Nevada lawmakers approved a corporation-friendly update to its business laws and separately moved toward asking voters to consider changing the state constitution to create a dedicated business court with appointed judges. So both of them are actually looking not just specifically to compete in terms of kind of like current legislation, but in terms of the actual future laws and an entire like kind of ancillary justice
It,
system. I thought that was
mhm.
particularly the most interesting
And
piece of this.
that's really been what Delaware's competitive advantage has been, right? And that's that chancery court system I was mentioning. It's
Hmm.
the business courts, not just the tax rates, that have attracted all of those businesses. I will say though, Jenny Rae, this is a double-edged sword because if I'm a shareholder and a large enough shareholder in a company and they go to incorporate in a state where I feel like I don't have the necessary protections, that makes that investing in that company less attractive to me.
Hmm.
So I think you have to think about this both ways as a business. It's not just how much can I get away with? Can I go to a state where like shareholder protections are minimized? It's can I go to a state that's going to expedite some of these hearings like you mentioned? Can I go to a state where this litigation is going to move faster? Can I go to a state where I have some of these advantages, but not so many to where it makes investing in my company unattractive? And so that I think is the balance. And I don't know, where Texas, Nevada, Oklahoma are on that scale, but it's something I'd be thinking about as a leader or a business owner before I made the move.
That makes sense, Naman. And the size of the business is going to appeal to these corporate franchise taxes. And so the size of businesses that you're talking about have the shareholders. When we look at a shareholder stack, for example, for a distributor that Home Depot is looking for, a lot of them are going to stick with Delaware simply because that's the place that they know and the place that they've litigated in the past. So it is going to take something kind of edgy, and that edge does risk on the business side, attracting those kinds of corporations having issues. I think what we're going to find is that a lot of the businesses that are incorporating in these places are privately owned. So they're not going to be publicly owned businesses. I don't think we're going to see a shed of the publicly owned businesses from Delaware. I also think that we're going to find that they wrestle with that not at the beginning of the decision, but later, right? When they're at the 5, 10, 50, $100 million mark, they're targets for private equity. And all of a sudden, these are the questions that they
Mhm.
have to,
This
to
only
wrestle
matters at a
with.
certain scale.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I'm not a corporate lawyer, but my understanding is that untying some of these things in the middle of litigation is impossible. In the middle of a transaction is actually pretty easy, right? Like you can reincorporate fairly easy in a different place. And so the ease of transition between some of these incorporated states is also going to be really important.
I'll tell you what put this on my radar. This made the business news a few months ago, and I don't know if those of you listening followed this as well, but Elon Musk had big issues with the court system in Delaware because a judge in the business court system there shot down his pay package and said that the board had approved it not in the best interest of shareholders. And so he started making a lot of noise about reincorporating in Texas. And I think this brought a lot of attention to something that's really been shrouded in mystery for the general public for a long time, which is, oh, I guess companies just incorporate in Delaware. I don't know why. right? But he started making a lot of noise around, hey, you know what? This is a pay package that the board approved for me. The courts have no right to shoot it down, right? The court was saying the board hadn't acted in its fiduciary duty. There's this whole back and forth, and so Elon threatened to reincorporate Tesla and some of his other businesses in Texas and leave Delaware. And so I think you saw here in Austin specifically a lot of momentum at in the Capitol for moving forward with some of these reforms and some of this business court setup because they were specifically oh, there it is, because they
There
were
it is. Yeah.
specifically
I
responding.
was like, I have a visual to support this.
Yeah,
Yes.
because they were specifically responding to what Elon was saying publicly.
Absolutely right. And so you see those again, right? The question in this case is not necessarily based on some kind of internal strategy for the organizations. These are requests that are being made of these as well. I did want to kind of highlight this, right? Oklahoma also took action to get in the mix. I think Oklahoma is a really interesting player in this space right now because they are working super hard to attract businesses, to attract homeowners. I'm in a Facebook group in California for educational purposes called Leaving California. And the number of people that are moving to and encouraging people to move to Oklahoma is kind of fascinating to me. Right. But the Republican led legislature sanctioned the creation again of business courts. But here it wasn't statewide, it was in their two most populous counties. So it was actually specifically in not just even in Oklahoma, but actually on a county by county basis. We see that in California, which I think is interesting. We do see internal competition inside the state as well. So, like we talked about with federalism in California, we have a countywide system, and you will try to get something tried or processed, or you'll have a lawyer in different parts of the state simply because of the way that they operate. And so,
That
it's
seems to
very
me
interesting.
that seems to me to be the 80/20 rule in effect. Like what they're probably banking on is 80% of businesses that would come to Oklahoma would probably incorporate in two counties anyways. So
Hmm.
it's gonna be 20% of the
Why
cost to set up
staff
a court
it?
system.
And
Yeah, why
yeah.
staff it all over the state? Let's just staff these two counties and we'll get 80% of the incremental gain. That seems to make sense to me on the surface.
I love it. Well, you can't always make, I think one of the big mistakes that a lot of people make when they start to think about the public sector is that they assume that it operates like businesses. It doesn't usually, right? There are different rules, different egos, different motives at
Different
play, but
incentives. Yeah.
different incentives, absolutely. But I definitely think that this is one of those interesting places where you see pretty close parallels, and it's pretty interesting. So if you have incorporated somewhere other than the state that you have to incorporate in, like California, or if you've incorporated in Delaware, you've considered some of these other states, we would love to hear from you. If you are a corporate lawyer and you're thinking about these issues and you think that there's nuance that we missed, we would also love to hear about that. Naman, anything else that you want to tag on today in terms of world news, business news, or otherwise before we sign off?
No, thanks for joining us for this riveting conversation on, corporate governance, business courts, states competing against each other. I really enjoyed it, and I hope you all learned something new. We'll see you later this week for another edition of Market Outsiders. Have a wonderful Tuesday.